My name was Eleanor Whitmore, and at 58 years old, I thought I had perfected the craft of motherhood, but I was wrong in ways that still sting when I replay them in my mind. What I didn't realize until it was almost too late is that sometimes children, those very souls you poured your life into, can grow up to be your harshest critics, your greatest betrayers, and the ones who make you feel like a stranger in the home you built for them. I had raised two children after my beloved husband Jonathan died suddenly from a stroke 5 years ago. My daughter, Rebecca, 30 years old, tall and sharp as her father had been, was the so-called golden child, the lawyer who thought her Harvard degree made her the smartest in every room. And then there was my son, Daniel, only 27, handsome and charming, engaged to a young woman named Olivia, who had perfected the art of smiling sweetly in front of me and stabbing me behind my back. I lived in a historic colonial house outside Boston, Massachusetts, the kind of home that had been featured in local magazines for its lush gardens and antique interiors. The pride I took in every polished floorboard, every stained glass window, and every inch of those roses Jonathan and I had planted together was immense. Because this house wasn't just property, it was the physical embodiment of a life of sacrifice and care. The morning that shattered everything began so innocently. I was in the sunroom, arranging a bouquet of peonies in a vase Jonathan had given me for our 20th anniversary, the morning light catching the glass in a way that reminded me of better days, when my son Daniel called. I answered with my usual warmth, smiling because I thought he wanted to tell me about the final details for his wedding to Olivia, scheduled for just 6 weeks away at the Grand Belmont Country Club. I had been funding every last element of this affair. The $70,000 venue deposit, the French roses imported for the floral arches, the invitations embossed in gold leaf, the couture dress Olivia had cried over in a Manhattan boutique. I had spared no expense because I believed that giving my son this dream was proof of my enduring love. Mom? Daniel's voice was clipped, impatient. We need to talk about the guest list. I put down the vase and sat straighter. Of course, sweetheart, what's wrong? His tone hardened. You invited the McKinneys. My breath caught. The McKinneys were our oldest friends, people who had been by our side through Jonathan's illness, people who had watched both Daniel and Rebecca grow up. Yes, dear, Margaret has been my friend for nearly 3 decades, and she— Uninvite them, he snapped. I blinked, convinced I had misheard. I beg your pardon? He sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh children give when they think you're too dense to understand. Olivia thinks they're boring. They don't belong at our wedding. This isn't some stuffy old people event, Mom. Either uninvite them or I will. That word, boring, landed like an insult wrapped in acid. The McKinneys had practically been family. Daniel, that's not fair. Margaret was at your baptism, your graduation, your father's funeral. She loves you. His reply sliced into me with surgical cruelty. Stop being such a pest, Mom. This is my wedding, not yours. You always have to stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Pest. After everything I had sacrificed, everything I had built, everything I had poured into him, I was reduced to a pest in his vocabulary? I felt my throat tighten, but before I could respond, he doubled down. If you can't respect our wishes, maybe you shouldn't be part of this at all. The call ended abruptly. I sat there in the silence of my perfect sunroom, surrounded by flowers and light, but all I felt was something shattering deep inside me. Not heartbreak, because I'd known heartbreak before, but a kind of breaking that went straight to the core of my identity. Barely an hour later, my daughter Rebecca called. Mom, I heard about the fight with Daniel, she began in that cool, lawyerly voice of hers. I steadied myself. Your brother called me a pest for inviting people who love him. Rebecca chuckled coldly, as if I were being dramatic. He's just stressed. Weddings do that. Honestly, you should apologize. Be the bigger person. Daniel doesn't need you making this harder than it already is. I gripped the edge of my chair so tightly my knuckles whitened. Apologize to him for including people who helped raise you both? She didn't hesitate. Yes. Look, Mom, I don't want to say this, but if I have to choose between keeping peace with Daniel and Olivia or with you, I'll pick them. I can't lose my brother. Not now. Her words fell into me like shards of glass. So, you'd rather lose your mother than lose your brother? The silence that followed confirmed everything. She didn't say yes, but she didn't need to. I could hear the truth in her lack of denial. In that instant, something inside me crystallized. For years, I had given them homes to live in, cars to drive, insurance policies to keep them safe, trust funds to cushion their lives. And in return, I was a pest to one and disposable to the other. Slowly, a smile spread across my face. Not of joy, but of cold resolve. "Message received, Rebecca," I said softly, loud and clear. She tried to backpedal, but I didn't let her. "From now on, you both have exactly what you want, a life without your pest of a mother interfering." I hung up, and within an hour, I had called the wedding planner and told her to cancel everything: the venue, the flowers, the band, the catering, every last glittering piece of that dream wedding. When she protested about lost deposits, I told her I didn't care. Then I called my property manager and ordered eviction notices for the townhouse Rebecca lived in. Next, I phoned the dealership to repossess Daniel's car. By the time I opened a chilled bottle of Dom Perignon that had been reserved for Daniel's wedding toast, the taste of champagne on my lips was sweeter than any revenge I had ever imagined. For the first time in decades, I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman with power. And I whispered to myself, gazing at the roses Jonathan and I had planted so long ago, the words that would define the battle ahead. So be it. The first scream reached my ears at 7:15 the next morning, high-pitched and ragged, tearing through the quiet elegance of my colonial home like the cry of a wounded animal. I was mid-stretch in my yoga studio, the one lined with mirrors and warmed by the soft light filtering through lace curtains, when I saw her. Olivia, my son Daniel's fiancée, standing in the driveway in her silk robe, her phone clutched like a weapon, her hair a wild halo around her tear-streaked face. She was shrieking into the phone, pacing like a caged panther, her voice carrying through the glass as she screamed words I couldn't quite catch. I flowed gracefully into my son's salutation, exhaling slowly as if her meltdown were the soundtrack to my own awakening. By the third call that morning, my phone lit up with Daniel's name, but I ignored it twice before finally answering on the fourth ring, my voice calm, almost melodic. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, settling into my favorite armchair with my tea. His voice exploded through the speaker. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" I stirred my tea with unhurried precision. "You'll have to be more specific, darling. I've done quite a few things this morning. I watered the orchids, read the paper, canceled your entire wedding." Silence. Thick, choking silence on the other end of the line. "You what?" Daniel finally whispered, his voice cracking like a boy's. "Canceled everything. Venue, flowers, catering, musicians, photographer. Quite efficient, really. I was impressed with myself." He stammered. "But the deposits, the contracts, you can't just—" "Oh, but I can," I cut in, my tone smooth as silk. "It was my money that funded your fairy tale, my connections that secured your reservations, my reputation that guaranteed your vendors. And since I'm nothing but a pest in your story, I decided to remove myself from the picture entirely." His voice rose in desperation. "Mom, you can't do this. Olivia's parents, her whole family is going to think we're a disaster." I sipped my tea, the porcelain cup clinking lightly against the saucer. "Aren't you, though?" The silence on the line stretched, thick and damning. Then came his whimper. "Mom, please, I didn't mean it. I was stressed. You know how weddings are." "Were." Past tense. There is no wedding. And I hung up. Not 10 minutes later, Rebecca's name lit up my phone. "Mom, are you insane?" she demanded before I could say a word. "Daniel just called me in tears. You canceled his wedding?" I allowed myself a soft laugh. I did. After all, it was nothing but a pest interfering in his perfect day. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're punishing us because he said one word?" My fingers traced the rim of my teacup. "One word, dear? No. This is about years of disrespect. One word was just the match that lit the bonfire." Rebecca's voice hardened. "You're destroying everything over your feelings. Daniel's fiance is devastated. Her whole family is going to think we're a disaster." I sipped my tea, the porcelain cup clinking lightly against the saucer. "Aren't you, though?" The silence on the line stretched, thick and damning. Then came his whimper. "Mom, please. I didn't mean what I said yesterday. I wasn't choosing Daniel over you. I just didn't want the drama." My laugh was sharp this time, a slice of ice through the phone. "You told me you'd rather lose your mother than your brother." Message received. "And now, darling, you'll get to experience what life looks like without me." I ended the call before she could reply and moved briskly through my list of morning tasks. Next came the call to my property manager. Rebecca's townhouse lease was terminated, eviction notice effective in 30 days. Then to the insurance company to remove Daniel's car from my policy, followed by a call to the dealership to repossess the vehicle by end of day. Each call was a liberation, a chain snapped, a cord cut. With each severed tie, I felt the years of being taken for granted fall from my shoulders like dead weight. By noon, I was standing in my garden with a flute of champagne. The expensive bottle Jonathan and I had been saving for Daniel's wedding was now bubbling in my glass as I toasted the sun-drenched roses. The irony tasted delicious. For the first time in decades, I wasn't trembling with the need to keep my children happy. I was powerful, and I was free. And then, as if the universe wished to reward my clarity, I heard the screech of tires in the driveway. Olivia had driven Daniel's repossessed car back, unaware of what awaited her. The look on her face when the dealership tow truck pulled in behind her, ready to take the car away, was better than any champagne buzz. She stormed to my door, pounding her manicured fists against the mahogany wood, her shrieks carrying through the halls. "You witch! You ruined everything!" I calmly placed my glass on the table, walked to the door, and called out through the wood. "Correction, dear. I ruined nothing. I merely stopped funding their illusions." Her shrieks echoed as the tow truck driver hooked the car and drove away. I returned to my garden, lifted my glass once more, and whispered again the mantra that had become my declaration of war. So be it. 3 days later, after my phone had rung more than 50 times with unanswered calls from Daniel, Rebecca, and even Olivia's mother, I began phase 2 of what I had privately christened my education plan. It wasn't enough to cut off the financial support, to cancel the wedding and repossess the cars. That was merely the scaffolding of dependency crumbling. They needed to understand how fragile their social world was without me holding it steady. So on Thursday morning, as the autumn sunlight poured through my dining room windows, I picked up the phone and called Patricia Wallace, the mother of Rebecca's husband, Thomas. Patricia was old money from Connecticut, the kind of woman who could sniff out social instability the way a bloodhound catches a scent. "Patricia, dear, it's Eleanor Whitmore," I began, my voice laced with maternal worry. "I just wanted to reach out before the rumor mill twists everything." She leaned in through the receiver. Women like her lived for being the first to know. "Oh, Eleanor, what's happened?" I sighed just enough to sound exhausted. "It's Rebecca. She's been under immense stress with her brother's canceled wedding, and I worry she's not handling the pressure well. Outbursts, impulsive decisions, irresponsibility with money. I'm doing what I can, but I fear she's not ready for the responsibilities she's taken on." Patricia gasped, the little thrill of gossip igniting her words. "Oh my, Thomas hasn't mentioned a thing." I chuckled softly. "He's a good man, always trying to protect her, but I just felt it best you know. Marriage is difficult enough without immaturity complicating it." By dinner that evening, I knew Patricia's concern would be spread across the tennis club, the women's luncheon, and every whispered corner of our circle. Next, I called Melissa Gray, the boutique owner where Rebecca had been angling for a management role. Melissa, I appreciate you giving Rebecca an opportunity, truly. But between us, she's under tremendous strain. Mood swings, unrealistic expectations, difficulty focusing. I just wouldn't want her personal struggles to impact your business. Melissa was silent for a moment, then said carefully, "That's surprising, Eleanor. She hides it well." I smiled into the phone. "That's what worries me. She puts on a good face, but I see the cracks at home." By the time I hung up, I had planted seeds of doubt in two key places: her marriage and her career. With Daniel, my strategy was more direct. I called Robert Ashton, senior partner at Daniel's law firm, a man who had golfed with Jonathan for years. "Robert, thank you for mentoring Daniel. He's bright, full of potential, but I must confess I've been concerned. Since his engagement troubles, he's been under financial pressure, and sometimes desperation leads to poor judgment. I'd hate for his personal instability to spill over into his work." Robert's pause was all I needed to know the seed had landed. When he finally spoke, his voice carried that edge of doubt that can shadow a career forever. "I'll keep an eye on him, Eleanor. Thank you for your honesty." Honesty. What a delicious word. Every syllable I had spoken was technically true, but framed in a way that turned my children into liabilities rather than assets. That afternoon, as I lunched at the Boston Harbor Yacht Club, I heard whispers already circulating. "Poor Rebecca. Such a shame she's unraveling. Daniel always seemed so stable, but maybe the wedding mess broke him." Each whisper was a victory, not because I relished their suffering, but because it proved how quickly the ground could shift beneath them when I stepped away. By evening, my phone rang again. This time it was Olivia's father, Charles Whitaker, his voice clipped and furious. "Mrs. Whitmore, my daughter tells me you deliberately sabotaged her wedding. Do you have any idea what humiliation this has caused?" I swirled the last sip of Chardonnay in my glass, smiling. "Humiliation, Charles, is a daughter-in-law calling her fiancé's mother a pest. Humiliation is two children telling me I'm disposable. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply stopped writing checks." He sputtered, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged. "This will ruin Daniel, his reputation." "Then perhaps he should build a reputation based on his own merit," I replied coolly. When I hung up, I felt the satisfaction ripple through me like warmth from a fire on a winter's night. They thought they could dismiss me. They thought I would keep paying, keep saving, keep smoothing every bump. But they were learning, step by painful step, that without me, their glittering facade cracked like cheap porcelain. That night, I toasted my reflection in the window and whispered, "So be it." The charity gala was my masterpiece, the crown jewel of my entire campaign, because it was never enough to quietly cut them off or let rumors swirl in drawing rooms. I needed to place them under the blinding spotlight of our social world and let them flounder in front of everyone who had ever envied them, admired them, or whispered about them. For 3 weeks, I orchestrated every detail with the precision of a general preparing for war. And the theme, strengthening family values, was the most exquisite irony I could imagine. I booked the ballroom of the Liberty Grand Hotel in downtown Boston, the very same venue where Daniel and Olivia's wedding reception was supposed to take place, and the symbolism alone gave me chills. I ensured the guest list was a flawless cross-section of our city's elite. Old families like the Wallaces and the Prestons, business titans from Beacon Hill, the president of Daniel's law firm, the board members of Olivia's family foundation, and of course, Rebecca's in-laws. Then I sent engraved invitations to my children themselves, invitations that weren't optional, but demanded attendance. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore requests the honor of your presence at a benefit supporting the Strengthening Family Values Foundation. Black tie required. I knew they would come, because refusing would brand them as petulant children, unwilling to support their mother's philanthropic efforts, and in our circle, that kind of social suicide was far deadlier than any financial loss. On the night of the event, I arrived fashionably late, draped in a sapphire velvet gown and Jonathan's diamonds that caught the light with every graceful movement. The crowd quieted when I entered, the ripple of admiration undeniable, and I moved among them like a queen surveying her court. Margaret Preston leaned in, whispering, "Eleanor, this is magnificent. You've outdone yourself." I gave her a knowing smile. Family deserves nothing less, don't you agree? At precisely 8 p.m., I spotted Daniel and Rebecca entering together, both in formal wear that should have made them shine, but instead made them look pitifully diminished. Daniel wore a rented tuxedo that sagged at the shoulders, Rebecca a black dress recycled from years past that couldn't mask her exhaustion. They scanned the glittering room with nervous eyes, and for the first time in their lives, they looked like outsiders pressing against the glass of the very world they had once ruled. I greeted them warmly, my voice dripping maternal sweetness. "Darlings, I'm so pleased you came. Come, let me introduce you around." Before they could object, I paraded them through the room, introducing them with carefully chosen words that painted them as wayward children fumbling toward responsibility. "This is my daughter Rebecca, going through such an interesting period of growth and self-discovery. And my son Daniel, learning the importance of standing on his own 2 feet without leaning too heavily on family support." Each introduction was another knife slipped beneath their social armor, delivered with such graciousness that no one could accuse me of malice. I watched the subtle shift in people's eyes, the slight coolness in their smiles, the careful politeness that replaced the warmth they once offered my children. Every handshake was another brick in the wall I was building between them and the world they thought was theirs by birthright. At 9:30 p.m., I took the stage, the spotlight bathing me in brilliance as the string quartet faded into silence. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice carrying strong and clear, "and thank you for joining me tonight to support such an important cause." The ballroom hushed, all eyes on me. I could see Rebecca and Daniel near the back, stiff as statues, dread etched across their faces. "Family values," I continued, "are the foundation of our society. But sometimes those values become corrupted by entitlement, by forgetting that love and support are gifts, not obligations. Even the strongest family bonds can be tested when gratitude is replaced with expectation." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but my gaze never wavered from my children. I've learned recently that the most loving thing a parent can do is step back and allow their children to experience the consequences of their choices. It is not easy to watch them struggle, but it is necessary for growth. Tonight, I want to thank my own children for teaching me this lesson. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, realizing the speech was more personal than they expected, but I pressed on, my words silk-wrapped daggers. "Rebecca and Daniel have shown me the importance of letting young adults build lives on their own merits, without leaning on their mother's reputation or resources. They've chosen independence, and I am proud of their courage." My children's faces crumbled, their humiliation complete, as whispers surged around them like wildfire. Devon's parents, the Prestons, exchanged sharp looks, clearly reassessing Rebecca's future stability, while Daniel's senior partner folded his arms with the wary expression of a man rethinking a protégé's reliability. The applause that followed was polite, but uneasy, the kind given not to a speech, but to a spectacle. And then, right on cue, Rebecca burst into tears, pushing past the crowd in a dramatic exit, Daniel trailing behind her with his jaw clenched in rage. Phones lit up as guests recorded the scene, and before the evening was over, video of Rebecca's breakdown and Daniel's retreat was circulating online with captions like "Entitled Siblings Exposed at Charity Gala." I descended from the stage, accepting murmured condolences from women who praised my bravery. "You're handling this with such grace," whispered Patricia Wallace, squeezing my hand. "Not every mother could be so strong." I lowered my eyes with practiced humility. Sometimes love means saying no. And with that, the narrative was complete. Eleanor Whitmore, the sainted mother, standing firm against entitled children, while Rebecca and Daniel became cautionary tales of what happens when privilege collapses. The aftermath of the gala rippled through Boston society faster than a nor'easter tearing down the coast. And within 48 hours, my children were no longer seen as the polished heirs of the Whitmore name, but as unstable burdens no one wished to touch. On Monday morning, Margaret Preston called me at 9 sharp, her voice trembling with the excitement of gossip barely contained. "Eleanor dear, I thought you should know. Devin has broken off his engagement to Rebecca." I let out a carefully measured gasp, my tone equal parts maternal sorrow and dignified restraint. "Oh, my goodness, how terrible!" Margaret lowered her voice as though the walls themselves were listening. "He told his parents he couldn't handle the public humiliation, especially with his colleagues whispering about Rebecca's breakdown at your gala. Patricia said it was all too much of a risk for his career." I murmured the right words. So tragic, so unfortunate. But inside, I felt the cold satisfaction of a queen watching enemy pawns fall from the board. By mid-afternoon, the calls kept coming. Melissa Gray from the boutique phoned to inform me she had let Rebecca go permanently. "Eleanor, I hated to do it, but after the gala, customers started asking not to be served by her. With the video circulating online, she's become, well, infamous. I can't afford the damage to my shop." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "I understand completely, Melissa. Business must come first." That same day, Daniel's senior partner, Robert Ashton, reached out in a clipped tone that told me my earlier seeds of doubt had blossomed into full-grown suspicions. "Eleanor, I regret to inform you that Daniel's been put on probation. Clients have requested reassignment, citing concerns about his stability after recent incidents." His hesitation was delicious. "I understand, Robert. These things happen. Growth often comes from adversity," I said softly, planting myself firmly in the role of wise, grieving mother. By evening, both of my children arrived at my door, haggard and broken, Rebecca's mascara streaking her face, Daniel's tie askew and eyes bloodshot. They barged into my living room, their voices trembling between fury and desperation. "This has to stop," Daniel snapped. "You've destroyed our reputations, our relationships, everything." I swirled my wine with delicate grace. "Destroyed? No, my dear. I simply withdrew the scaffolding you both mistook for your own strength." Rebecca burst into quiet sobs, her voice small. "Devin left me. He said I'm unstable. I lost my job. My friends won't return my calls. I have nothing, Mom. Nothing." Daniel added bitterly. "And my career is on life support. Senior partners are treating me like a liability. I could lose everything I worked for." I set down my glass and met their desperate eyes. "Everything you worked for, or everything I built for you?" The silence stretched until Rebecca whispered, "Please, just stop talking to people. Stop spreading these rumors." My laugh was soft but sharp. "Rumors? I have only spoken the truth. That you were learning to live independently, that you're facing challenges like every adult must. If others interpret that as instability, perhaps you should ask yourselves why." Daniel clenched his fists. "You're punishing us because we hurt your feelings." I tilted my head. "Can it not be both punishment and lesson? Did you not say you'd rather lose your mother than admit I deserved respect? Well, here is life without me exactly as you wished." Rebecca dropped to her knees, sobbing openly now. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to keep the peace. Please, please, fix this." Daniel's voice cracked for the first time. "We'll do anything. Just stop." I leaned forward, my smile cold as steel. "Oh, my darlings, you're not sorry for how you treated me. You're sorry for the consequences. There's a difference." The room filled with their tears and pleading, but I remained unmoved, sipping my wine as if it were their anguish in the glass. "Actions have consequences," I said softly. "You're merely tasting yours." They left an hour later, defeated, Rebecca's sobs trailing into the night, Daniel's shoulders slumped like a boy punished at school. As their car pulled away, I stood at the window, my heart steady, my mind resolute. They thought they could reduce me to a pest, discard me like an old coat. Now, stripped of their comfort and privilege, they would learn what true independence tasted like, and they would choke on it. The call came late on a Wednesday evening, just as I was rinsing my wine glass and preparing for bed, the deep tones of the detective's voice announcing themselves like a drumbeat of fate. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is Detective Harris with the Boston Police Department. I'm calling regarding your son, Daniel." My pulse quickened, though I kept my voice calm. "Is he all right?" "He's been arrested on charges of credit card fraud. Several stolen numbers were traced back to his laptop. He admitted to making online purchases. Bail is set at $50,000. I sank into a chair, the irony washing over me like a tide. Daniel, the ambitious lawyer, reduced to crime because he couldn't handle the humiliation of living without my support. "I'll be down shortly," I said, my voice steady as ice. Hours later, I watched him shuffle out of the holding area, his once perfect suit wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes hollow with shame. We drove home in silence, the city lights flashing across his face like the remnants of a life burning down. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you for posting bail." I kept my eyes on the road. "You're welcome." He waited, then said bitterly, "I suppose you're going to lecture me." I glanced at him, my lips curved in a sad smile. "No, Daniel. The criminal justice system will handle that quite thoroughly." He flinched, the truth sinking into his bones. "You're not going to help me?" "I already did. I bailed you out. But hiring lawyers, shielding you from consequences? No. You chose crime over humility, fraud over pride. You'll live with that choice." He turned away, staring out the window as though the city itself had betrayed him. When we reached my driveway, he lingered in the car, his voice small for the first time in years. "Mom, I'm scared." I laid a hand on the steering wheel, steady. "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes. Use it." He said nothing more as he climbed out, the broken posture of a boy trapped in a man's disaster. The next morning, the Boston Globe carried the headline, "Local attorney arrested for credit card fraud." By noon, Robert Ashton had called to inform me that Daniel's employment was terminated. "I'm sorry, Eleanor, but we cannot have someone facing criminal charges representing our clients." My reply was calm. "I understand, Robert. Sometimes lessons come hard." Meanwhile, Rebecca showed up at my door with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. "Devin left me," she croaked, as if I hadn't already heard. "I lost my job. My friends won't even answer my texts. Mom, I'm drowning." I offered her tea, which she barely touched. "And why do you think all of this happened?" Her voice cracked. "Because you're destroying me." I shook my head slowly. "No, darling. I only removed the shield. What you're experiencing is the world without a safety net. Every action, every attitude, every ounce of entitlement has consequences." She folded into herself, sobbing. "I don't know how to live like this. I don't know how to survive without you." I leaned forward, my eyes sharp. "Then learn. Millions do it every day. You're not special." She stared at me, horror etched across her face as if the mother she once knew had been replaced by something merciless. Perhaps she was right. The Eleanor who fixed everything died the day they called me a pest. This version of me was reborn in fire and steel. That night, as I poured another glass of wine and stood at my window overlooking the garden Jonathan and I had once tended, I thought of my children, one facing trial, the other abandoned and unemployed, and felt no guilt, only clarity. They had wanted life without their mother's interference, and they were getting it in full, bitter measure. And for the first time, I believed they might finally be forced to grow.
8 months after that first phone call where Daniel dared to call me a pest, my children had been transformed by the grinding gears of consequence, and I had front row seats to the spectacle. Rebecca, once the elegant fiancée of a wealthy man and a boutique darling, was now folding clearance sweaters at a discount clothing chain on the outskirts of town, earning barely above minimum wage, her hands calloused, her back aching from double shifts. When she came to visit one evening, she looked thinner, sharper around the edges, her once smooth hands wrapped around a mug of tea like they were starving for warmth. "I got promoted," she said quietly, exhaustion woven into every syllable. "Assistant shift supervisor. $2 more an hour. I train new employees now." I raised my brow, hiding the flicker of pride that threatened to show. "That sounds like responsibility." She sighed. "It is. And the crazy thing is, I'm good at it. I'm patient with people, I explain things well, and for once I feel useful." She paused, eyes welling. "But Mom, is this it? Is my life just surviving on scraps? Counting every dollar? Praying my car doesn't break down?" I leaned forward. 8 months ago, you couldn't imagine paying for gas without my card. Now, you're talking about survival and purpose. That's growth. She bit her lip. "It doesn't feel like growth. It feels like I lost everything." I shook my head slowly. "No, Rebecca, you lost illusions. You're building something real now." She wiped her eyes and whispered, "I hate that you're right." Meanwhile, Daniel's downfall had reached its nadir. The prosecutor offered him a plea deal, 6 months in county jail, 2 years probation. His public defender urged him to take it, but he clung to pride like a drowning man to driftwood. "I can fight this," he insisted when he visited, pacing my living room with the desperation of a caged animal. "I'll argue financial duress. I cut him off with a laugh colder than ice. "Financial duress? Daniel, you weren't stealing bread to feed your family. You bought luxury watches and electronics you couldn't afford. That's not duress. That's arrogance." His shoulders sagged, and for the first time, honesty broke through his defenses. "Fine. I was arrogant. I couldn't handle being cut off, living small. I thought I deserved better. And now I'm terrified." I walked to him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good. Terror is the teacher pride refuses to be." When his sentencing came, I sat in the courtroom, watching my son in orange scrubs, thinner and pale, as the judge pronounced the terms: 6 months jail, 2 years probation. He nodded stiffly, and when his eyes found mine in the crowd, I didn't flinch. I gave him a single, slow nod. Acknowledgement, not rescue. That evening, Rebecca texted me after her shift. "Mom, I don't think I'm strong enough for this." I replied simply, "You're stronger than you think. You just don't know it yet." Her response came an hour later. "I hope you're right, because I'm so tired of feeling invisible." I set down my phone, poured another glass of wine, and gazed at the darkening Boston skyline. "Invisible," she said. No, this was the first time in her life she was visible to herself, stripped of privilege, forced to face who she truly was. And Daniel, locked away in a cell, was finally learning that choices carry weight. My children thought I had destroyed them, but what they didn't yet understand was that I was reshaping them. Fire tempers steel, and I had lit the match. 18 months after the day my children called me a pest and told me they could live without me, I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse overlooking the Boston Harbor, the sea air sharp and clean, the skyline glittering with possibility, and I realized I had finally built a life that belonged only to me. I had sold the old colonial home in Newton, the one filled with decades of memories of Jonathan and the children, because I no longer needed walls that echoed with the sound of ungrateful voices. Instead, I chose this airy space, high above the city, with sweeping views of the water that reminded me every day of how vast freedom could feel. By then, Rebecca had remade herself. She had clawed her way up from folding discount sweaters to managing Monica Gray's flagship store downtown, earning a real salary, benefits, and respect she had never truly tasted before. When she visited, she brought flowers. Grocery store carnations at first, later lush bouquets she bought with her own paycheck. And every time she handed them to me with shy eyes, I saw the woman she was becoming. "Mom," she said one evening, over roasted chicken at my new dining table, "I used to think happiness meant getting everything I wanted. Now, I think it means wanting what I've earned." My chest swelled, pride and sorrow mingling because it had taken stripping her bare to show her the value of her own strength. Meanwhile, Daniel had served his 6 months in county jail and emerged gaunt but changed, his arrogance sanded down to something resembling humility. Instead of chasing prestige, he took a job at a legal aid clinic, helping ex-felons, immigrants, and single mothers navigate a justice system that once devoured him. "It doesn't pay much," he admitted during one of our long balcony talks, "but for the first time, I feel like my degree means something. I'm helping people who don't have anyone else." And in his tired eyes, I saw a flicker of the boy he had once been, the boy who wanted to fight for fairness before entitlement poisoned him. That Christmas, for the first time in years, both of them came to my new home, carrying not demands or resentment, but themselves. We cooked together, laughed awkwardly, and for once, our conversations weren't about what I could provide, but who they were becoming. Rebecca confessed she had turned down Devin when he came crawling back, realizing he only wanted the polished version of her old self. "That girl doesn't exist anymore," she said with a quiet smile. Daniel admitted he was saving every extra dollar to repay the restitution from his case, not because the court required it, but because he needed to prove to himself that he was no longer the man who stole. As I listened, I realized something extraordinary. I no longer feared for them. They weren't fragile illusions propped up by my money. They were adults, tempered by fire. And for the first time in 30 years, I liked them, not as extensions of me, not as dependents, but as people I would choose to know even if they weren't my children. Later that night, as the three of us watched the city lights shimmer across the harbor, Rebecca asked softly, "Do you understand now why we thought we didn't need you?" I sipped my wine and met her gaze. "Yes. And do you understand now why I had to let you find out?" Daniel, his voice steady, said, "You loved us enough to burn it all down." I nodded. Sometimes destruction is the only way to build something real. They both fell silent, but I saw the truth settle in their faces, acceptance carved into the lines that struggle had left behind. When they left the next morning, each returning to lives built on their own strength, I stayed on the balcony long after their cars disappeared, the gulls wheeling overhead, the waves pounding against the shore. I raised my glass to the horizon and whispered once more, "So be it." But this time, it was not a declaration of war. It was a benediction, a prayer of peace. I had set out to punish them, but in the end, I had created them anew. And perhaps in creating them, I had finally created myself.